disconnected.
Hey guys, welcome to Woodzman Adventures. Today I'm going to do my review on this thing. I've waited a while until at least got 1,000 miles on it so I can kind of explain what I think of it. I've been talking about it the whole time off and on videos, but I figure after 1,000 miles I kind of got more used to the bike and give my honest opinion of what I think of the bike, and especially compared to the 250L that I had before. I've had two 250Ls, the 2014 250L, the 2018 250L, and now the 2021 Honda CRF300L. So this will be a review of the 300L, just kind of going over what I think of the bike, what I do and I don't like about the bike. Of course, there's not going to be many of the don't likes because I really like this bike. So far, after 1,000 miles, the more I ride it, the more I actually start enjoying it. It's a step above the CRF 250L. If you have a CRF 250L and you like it, you know, it's a great bike, nothing wrong with it. But when they made the 300L, they really upped the bike. They didn't just up the power, they upped the whole feel of the bike. It's got different geometry because the frame's different, seating's different. Everything about the bike is really a totally different bike. It's not a 250L with a larger CCs. It is a new redesigned bike, and in my opinion, a lot better bike. Now, there's nothing wrong with the 250L, but I'm just saying, for me and especially for a more experienced rider, this bike is definitely a better choice. It's all around. It's a lot more flickable. It just feels so much lighter. It handles so much better. The suspension is a touch better, but I wouldn't say it's great. The rear suspension still is terrible if you want to do anything too aggressive. But if you're just a casual rider like I actually am anymore, I used to do a lot of the extreme off-road stuff and jumping and motocross and all that. Now, of course, it's not made for that. But for what the bike is, the suspension is fine. It's for off-road riding, some fire trails, riding the dirt roads, the back roads, riding the paved highways, the suspension does good. The actual worst thing about the suspension, I believe, is the rebound. The compression, you can kind of crank it up by adjusting the springs and make it where you have more, make the bike a little stiffer. But as far as the rebound, you really can't do much. So sometimes when you hit some dips, it'll want to bounce in the back. Other than that, if it had a slower rebound, if it was adjustable, the suspension would be great. Of course, the tires on this bike is the same thing that you get on the CRF 250L. Even if you have a CRF 450L, these are the same IRC tires that bike has. And you know how they are. And as I've always said, they're okay on the highway. They're okay off-road. They're not great at anything. So just take that when you go out and you're riding in muddy stuff or a lot of loose gravel, wet pavement. They're just not that great a tire. They do okay to get by for something stock on the bike, and they last a long time. But I can tell you, if you get out in anything wet grass, mud, off-road and stuff like that, loose gravel, they kind of want to walk around a lot. There's just not a lot of grip to them. So buying us another set of tires would be a plus. As far as everything else, like the handling and everything is fine. It's real great handling bike. It's actually easier. The steering is a lighter feel. Everything feels lighter about the bike because it's so much easier to ride. The 250L feels kind of stiff and planted, where this bike feels like you really want to play with the bike, and it's easier to go fast with this bike than it is the 250L. As far as the gas tank, that's not much better. The gauge cluster up here is a lot better because you have the gear indicator. And believe it or not, I didn't think that the gear indicator on that cluster would be something that I'd be interested in or really care about, but on the 250L I would shift into fifth gear, then I would go into sixth, and then after I'm in sixth I would think that I'm still in fifth, so I'd want to shift one more time. I've actually never done it on this bike because I can just see I'm in sixth. I don't have to worry about shifting up, so I've never done it on this bike. It does have the display on there showing you your gas mileage, which is kind of handy. You can see that this thing shows it's getting about 72 miles a gallon. So your gas mileage is going to be about the same as it would on a 250 or a lot of these dual sports this size. So 70 mile a gallon, 72. If you're doing a lot more off-road, you're going to lose some of that gas mileage. Of course, you go changing the exhaust, you're going to lose some gas mileage. But 72 is really good fuel mileage, even though you're only packing about 2 gallons of gas. So you're saying you can get 120, 140 miles is pretty good guess out of this. The brakes work pretty good. They're not awesome brakes. The front brakes, I believe, is a lot better than the back. The back brakes to me feel stiff, but they really work. They work good, but the back brake feels like it could be a little better. As far as the clutch on this thing is absolutely the best clutch I've ever had. I've had bikes with hydraulic clutches. I've had bikes that I've added a hydraulic clutch. I've had the 250L, which I already thought was a great clutch pull. But this bike is the lightest, best feeling clutch that I've ever had, and it's not slipped a bit yet. Even doing some wheelies with the clutch, power wheelies, the clutch ain't slipped. Now this does have a slipper clutch in it. The slipper clutch is basically for whenever you're shifting down. If you shift down too fast, you could actually slide the back tire, and this is not supposed to do that. I've actually tried it to shift down fast and make the slipper clutch work, but I actually haven't noticed it. So to do that, obviously somebody doing it must be shifting down pretty aggressively and letting out on the clutch pretty hard when you've dropped too many gears. I've not had a problem at all noticing the slipper clutch. So one thing that I don't like about the bike is it doesn't come with a skid plate at all. I realize that, you know, the skid plate when you get a 250L or something is a pretty cheap skid plate, but at least it's something. For somebody that's just riding highways and stuff, or a few light gravel roads, that skid plate that come on the 250L was fine just for a little bit of gravel. But with no skid plate at all, it's really a big risk of taking a rock to the case and damaging something. So you definitely want to get a skid plate whenever you get this bike. Another thing I didn't like about the American model is the bike didn't come with LED lights. Now mine has the Thailand setup on the bike. It actually didn't come with that, but I was sent this stuff to put on here and review. I really love the LED turn signals and the headlight, but the review is not actually about the LEDs that I put on here from Honda. It's about the bike, the basic standard bike, and the headlight on these bikes are not that great. They do okay if you don't ride a lot of night. They do fine, but a great upgrade would be putting in a Cyclops LED bulb in your standard CRF300L headlight, because this LED option is way too expensive to just go purchase and add to the bike. As far as everything else, you know, with the 8,000 mile oil change intervals, with this bike, you're going to take this bike and ride it a long time and be problem free. 8,000 miles on the oil change. Your first one's at 600. I actually always do mine at 300. I do it a little early. And then every oil change I do at 4,000. So they say 8,000 and then 16,000 on your oil filter change. I usually just do mine every 4,000. I change the filter and the oil. I use the Honda GN4 10W30 every time. It's not that expensive to buy it. I buy it by the gallon. Seems like I get a better deal that way, and I've never had a problem on any of my bikes running that setup. As far as the chain and sprockets, the CRF300L comes with a 1440 that is like the 250L because it's the same gearing as far as that. The sprocket on the rear is different because it has smaller diameter bolts. They even made the sprocket a little thinner in the center part to lighten it up. So it's not exactly the same sprocket, and I don't believe they'll interchange. The front sprocket is the same, so they should interchange. As far as the gearing, this bike is geared a lot different than the 250L, and I'm not trying not to make this a comparison video, but that's what I've rode all this time as a 250L. So the gearing on this bike is great. It's a lot better. The gears are a lot closer together, so you shift a lot sooner in each gear. And then once you get up to 5th and 6th is where I notice it more. That's when you get into higher gears, but it's not extremely high geared in 6th gear. But the lower gears do help in the woods. This thing does real good, like tractoring up hills in the woods. It does a great job on the highway. You can see in my video here that I actually get up today. I rode it on the way home, and I actually got it up to about 79, 80, and that's not too bad. Out on the highway, I wouldn't want to spend a whole cross-country ride at 75 miles an hour on the interstate. One thing about this bike, it's so lightweight that when you get in a lot of traffic on the interstate and wind, you kind of notice it moving around with you. So the lightweight bike is not so great on the highway. But who wants to take a DUALSPORT and go on the highways anyway? You want to take this and go back roads, enjoy the scenery and stuff. I'm not a highway person, so if you have a commute of a highway of 20 miles, no big deal. I mean, 50 miles, I would rather just take back roads if you can, from your work to your home, whatever. I take a little bit of highway to work. Most time I take back road all the way to my work. It may be paved, but this bike does great on the back roads. It does great cornering. On the highway, it corners real good. The tires do adequate. You just got to watch them when the pavement's wet. You'll want to lose traction on the pavement when it's wet, so be careful with these stock tires. Another thing that I've noticed on this bike too is that the kickstand that come with this, yes, they added a wider foot peg, but why in the world Honda put a kickstand on here that's actually not long enough? Even with the bike stock, the bike really leans over a lot, and if you adjust the rear spring on it to give some more heft to it, well, then your bike really leans a lot. I actually have a added 1-inch piece to the bottom of my kickstand, and that makes it where the bike don't lean over as bad. You can see how it's sitting here. If it wasn't for that, the bike would really be leaning. As far as the everything else, it seems good. I did notice on the 300L versus the 250L that it puts off more heat on this radiator for some reason. It's on the right side, which shouldn't make a difference. Somebody's shooting a gun like crazy. But it does put off more heat coming off on your leg. You can feel it coming through the radiator and onto your leg. I don't know if the bike's actually running warmer or it's just the way it's vented through, the air pulls through onto your leg more and you just notice it more, but because the bike does not seem to run hot at all. I also, of course, I add luggage and a rack. One of the first things you'll want to do is put a rack on the bike so you can carry something on the back. I don't like strapping anything on the fender, so I got a rack on the back and I got some luggage on here, and that made a big difference. I keep this tank bag on just because it's easy to get to when you're riding the bike. You want to get something out quick, keep that in here. The tail bag is for more stuff that I don't actually need out all the time if I want to carry more of a load. So as far as the ergonomics of the bike, this bike is very comfortable. You'll notice it's similar to a 250L if you had one. The bike does set higher. It has a lot more ground clearance, quite a bit actually, more ground clearance under the frame to the ground than the 250L has. But the way they made the bike, you're not a lot taller, but it just, the ergonomics feel great. Positioning, the seat positioning feels good. The seat comes up a lot steeper here in the front, but you actually don't notice that. You scoot up right into position when you're riding. If you're riding off-road, you'll want to scoot forward farther. Riding a little bit of highway, I scoot back a little bit. If you want an aggressive corner, you want to scoot up to weighten the front tire. Helps a lot in the corners. Stock seat, I would rate it better than the 250L, but still not great. It's nothing like having an aftermarket seat, which I plan to get in the future. It's just a lot better bike. They've really done a good job on the 300L. Whether they'll come out with LED lights or something later, I don't know. Hopefully they do, because it would be an improvement, but that remains to be seen. Okay, so close up on the bike, you can see that this bike is actually a lot different look than the CRF300L. From a distance, people think it does look the same, but it's really not. This plastic is totally redesigned. The frame's redesigned. All of it is pretty much a different bike. Other than that, it's lighter frame. They changed that. They changed the engine, of course, to create more power. It has a lot better mid to low end power, and it also has more top end power due to the engine changes and the gearing changes. So some of the things they've changed is, like I said, they changed the frame. One thing they didn't do, they didn't add the subframe that's removable. This one's just welded on. So if you bent the subframe, you would have to change your whole frame, or actually have somebody that can weld good and repair it. The swing arm is different. It looks the same, but it is different. It's made different to make it lighter weight. The rear brake caliper and brake pads are the same. Rear disc is the same. Chain and sprockets. The sprocket actually is the same gearing like I said earlier, but it is different bolts. You can see here that this exhaust is actually small, and the reason they made it smaller than the 250L is to create more back pressure, and that's what helps with the torque. You can also see the radiator is on the right side of this bike, and on the 250L it's on the left. The hose comes down on this side, right behind the exhaust and down, instead of having to go in front of the motor across and down. So they redesigned that. You can see the dash display up here, And this is my 1,000 mile review, but I actually have 1,132 miles because I didn't get it done exactly in time. But the display is really nice on the dash. Like I said, these LED lights and the LED lights here and all this is not something that comes on the US model. Hopefully one of these days, maybe in a few years, a couple years, maybe they'll do that. I hope. They're doing it in some other countries, so maybe they'll put it in the United States also. That would be a big improvement. Thank you guys for watching. Click the thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. Ride on.
Connected.